The faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzed through the dimly lit halls of Rosewood Nursing Home, a place where time seemed to move slower than anywhere else. Nurses pushed wheelchairs toward the dining hall, where the smell of lukewarm soup hung in the air. Elderly residents shuffled about, their faces carrying stories of lifetimes past. Among them sat Mrs. Helen Thompson, a frail woman with warm, expressive eyes that told of kindness, endurance, and years of sacrifice. Though her body had grown weak with age, her spirit was anything but broken. Every day she waited by the window, staring at the parking lot, hoping to see one familiar face, the face of her only son. On this particular afternoon, the sound of polished shoes clicking against a linoleum floor broke her silence. Helen's heart skipped a beat as she looked up. Michael Thompson, her son, strode confidently into the nursing home lobby. He was dressed in an expensive tailored suit, his watch gleaming under the dull light. He looked every bit the successful businessman he had worked hard to become. Michael. Helen's face lit up with joy, her thin hands trembling as she reached out. "Oh, my dear boy, you came." Michael smiled faintly but didn't hug her. Instead, he looked at his watch as though his time here was already running out. "Yeah, Mom, I came, but I don't have long. I have a meeting soon," he said curtly. Helen's smile faltered slightly, but she clung to her hope. "That's all right, sweetheart. Even a few minutes with you means the world to me." The two sat together at a small table in the corner of the visitors' lounge. For a moment, Helen allowed herself to imagine that Michael had come to take her home, or at least to spend a quiet afternoon with her. She pictured him telling her stories of his new life, introducing her to his wife again, maybe even talking about her grandson. But Michael's expression was distant, impatient, as though he had somewhere better to be. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something. I've made a decision." Helen leaned in, her fragile heart pounding with nervous anticipation. "You can't live with me anymore," Michael said bluntly. It's too much. Between my job, my wife, and my kid, I just can't keep up with the responsibility. So, you'll be staying here permanently." The words sliced through the air like a blade. Helen's face fell, her hands trembling as she tried to process what she had just heard. "Michael, what do you mean? This is just temporary, isn't it? You promise you come back for me." Michael sighed, his tone sharp. "Mom, I don't have time for this. I can't keep rearranging my life around you. The nursing home can take better care of you than I ever could." Tears welled in Helen's eyes. She reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. "Michael, do you remember when your father left us? I worked 3 jobs to raise you. I went without food so you could eat. I walked miles to get you to school when we couldn't afford the bus. How can you say I'm too much responsibility now?" Michael's jaw tightened. "That was then. This is now. I didn't ask you to do those things. You chose to, and I can't let the past dictate my future. My family comes first, and you'll be fine here." The room grew heavy with silence. A couple of other residents nearby had overheard and glanced over, their faces filled with quiet judgment. Even one of the nurses shifted uncomfortably, sensing the cruelty in his words. Helen's lips quivered as tears slipped down her wrinkled cheeks. She whispered, "I am your family, Michael." But Michael was unmoved. He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket, preparing to leave. "Look, Mom, don't make this harder than it is. This place is good for you. They'll take care of you. I've done my part." As he turned to walk away, Helen called after him with a broken voice. "One day, Michael, one day life will teach you what it feels like to be abandoned." Michael didn't respond. He walked out the door without looking back, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Helen sat in silence, her tears falling onto the table, her heart shattered by the cold truth. The boy she had sacrificed everything for had just left her behind. The camera would linger on Helen's face, her sorrow, her disbelief, her whispered curse of karma, before fading to black. He thought leaving his mother behind was the easy way out. But little did Michael know, the very abandonment he inflicted would one day come back to haunt him. The weeks after Michael left his mother at Rosewood Nursing Home were some of the busiest of his life. His career in corporate finance was skyrocketing. He had just been promoted to senior vice president at his firm, a position that came with prestige, money, and influence. Colleagues admired his ambition. His wife, Sandra, flaunted their new wealth among friends. To outsiders, Michael looked like a man who had it all. He drove a sleek black Mercedes, lived in a spacious home in an upscale neighborhood, and dined at the finest restaurants. Michael told himself he had made the right decision. His mother, he reasoned, was being well taken care of by professionals, while he focused on important things. But deep inside, Helen's parting words lingered like a shadow. One day, life will teach you what it feels like to be abandoned. At first, Michael brushed them off. Yet over time, subtle cracks began to appear in the perfect picture he had painted of his life. It started with his son, Ethan, a bright 12-year-old with a soft heart. One evening, Ethan asked at the dinner table, "Dad, why don't we visit Grandma anymore?" Michael's fork froze midair. He cleared his throat and replied sharply, "Because Grandma is where she needs to be. The nursing home is her home now." "But she's all alone," Ethan persisted, his eyes wide with innocence. "When Grandpa died, didn't you promise you'd always take care of her?" Sandra gave Michael a side glance, sensing the tension, but she said nothing. Michael slammed his fork down and ended the conversation. Yet that night, lying awake in bed, Ethan's words gnawed at him. Still, Michael carried on with his fast-paced life. He buried his guilt under piles of paperwork, late-night meetings, and endless phone calls. Success became his drug, and the corporate world fed his addiction. Months later, however, the tide began to turn. It started with an unexpected corporate scandal. A deal Michael had approved came under federal investigation. Though he wasn't directly responsible, his name was tied to the paperwork. Whispers spread through the office corridors. Clients pulled back. His once reliable allies began distancing themselves, each trying to protect their own careers. At home, things weren't any better. Sandra had grown distant. The sparkle in her eyes was gone, replaced by frustration. She accused him of neglecting the family, of being absent at important moments. "Michael, you're never here for Ethan's games. You're never here for dinner. And when you are, you're angry or distracted," she snapped one evening. "This house feels emptier with you in it than without." Michael's temper flared. "Do you have any idea the pressure I'm under? Everything I do for this family." Sandra shook her head. "No, you do it for yourself, for your ego. You abandon your own mother for convenience. Don't act like you're doing this for us." The argument left Michael speechless, but the truth stung. He drowned his shame in a glass of scotch, staring blankly at the ceiling long into the night. Soon after, the corporate scandal escalated. Michael was called into a boardroom filled with grim-faced executives. His boss slid a folder across the table. "We've lost too many clients because of this mess. We need someone to take responsibility." "Michael, I'm afraid that someone is you." The words hit harder than he expected. After years of climbing the ladder, after sacrifices, betrayals, and endless ambition, Michael was being cast aside. His title, his salary, his prestige, gone in a moment, returning home jobless. Michael hoped for comfort. Instead, he found a cold reality. Sandra, tired of years of neglect and now fearful of financial collapse, packed her bags. "I can't do this anymore, Michael," she said as she walked out the door with Ethan. And just like that, Michael's world crumbled. He went from dinner reservations at five-star restaurants to eating alone in his empty kitchen, from driving a Mercedes to taking the bus because his car was repossessed, from power lunches with executives to lonely walks through the park, unnoticed by everyone he once looked down upon. One evening, as he sat on a park bench, the weight of his downfall pressing heavily on his shoulders, Michael noticed a group of elderly men and women walking together. They laughed, supported one another, and shared a sense of community. Watching them reminded him of Helen, sitting by that nursing home window, waiting for him to return. For the first time, Michael felt it, deep, piercing loneliness. The kind of loneliness that no money, no title, and no success could ever shield him from. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "One day, life will teach you what it feels like to be abandoned." Karma was catching up to him. and he could no longer escape it. Michael thought he was untouchable, but stripped of his career, his family, and his pride, he was about to face a painful truth. Sometimes the greatest punishment is living the life you once forced on someone else. The days stretched into weeks, and Michael found himself living in silence. The once bustling home that echoed with the sound of Sandra's heels and Ethan's laughter now stood eerily quiet. Dust gathered on picture frames, and the walls seemed to close in on him. Michael tried to fight the despair. He sent out resumes, reached out to former colleagues, but his reputation had already been tarnished. No one returned his calls. Doors that once swung open for him were now slammed shut. With each rejection, a bitter truth gnawed at him. He was alone, just as he had left his mother alone. One chilly afternoon, desperate for clarity, Michael decided to visit Rosewood Nursing Home for the first time since abandoning Helen. As he drove up, his hands trembled on the steering wheel. The once pristine Mercedes was gone. Now he arrived at a borrowed, beat-up sedan. Walking through the corridors, Michael's chest tightened. Nurses bustled about, wheelchairs rolled by, and the faint smell of antiseptic lingered in the air. He finally reached Helen's room and froze at the doorway. There she was, older, frilier, her once bright eyes dimmed by time. Yet when she turned and saw him, a flicker of recognition lit up her face. "Michael," she whispered, her voice weak but steady. Tears welled in his eyes. He had rehearsed apologies, excuses, and explanations, but none seemed worthy. Dropping to his knees beside her bed, he choked out, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was too busy, too important. But I was wrong. I lost everything, and I deserve it." Helen placed a trembling hand on his. Despite the pain he had caused her, her mother's heart still held love. "You've learned, my son. Life has shown you. But forgiveness is a gift. You must also forgive yourself." Her words pierced him deeper than any punishment. For the first time in years, Michael wept freely. The man who once prided himself on control and power was now just a broken son, humbled at his mother's bedside. In the weeks that followed, Michael became a frequent visitor at Rosewood. He helped Helen eat, read to her, and even joined her during recreational activities with the other residents. The same man who once saw caregiving as a burden now found comfort in these simple acts of service. And slowly, something inside him began to heal. But karma had more to teach him. One evening, while helping serve dinner to the residents, Michael overheard a conversation between two nurses. They spoke of an elderly man down the hall who rarely had visitors. Curiosity tugged at him, so he walked to the room. There, he found a frail man staring blankly at the wall. "Hello," Michael said gently. "Mind if I sit?" The man turned and Michael froze. It was Mr. Thompson, the very boss who had fired him months ago. The once powerful executive was now a shadow of himself, brought down by illness and age. Their eyes met, and in that silent moment, both men realized the irony of fate. Life had a way of humbling everyone, no matter how high they had climbed. Michael left the room shaken. It was then he understood success, money, and power were fleeting. What endured were relationships, kindness, and the legacy one left behind. From that day on, Michael committed himself to a different path. He spent less time chasing after opportunities and more time building bridges he had burned. He reconciled with Ethan, who, though hesitant at first, began to see a softer side of his father. He apologized to Sandra, acknowledging his failures. Though she chose not to return, she respected the man he was becoming. Most importantly, Michael cherished every moment with Helen. He sat by her window, the same one she once stared through waiting for him. And together, they watched the seasons change. She often reminded him, "Karma doesn't come to destroy us, Michael. It comes to teach us." Her words stayed with him long after she passed peacefully one spring morning, holding his hand until her very last breath. Michael left Rosewood that day with tears in his eyes, but peace in his heart. He had finally understood the lesson he had once ignored. Neglecting love brings loneliness, but nurturing it brings redemption. Michael abandoned his mother for success, only to be abandoned by the very life he chased. But through loss and regret, he discovered a truth far greater than wealth. Love is the only legacy worth leaving. Sometimes karma doesn't come as punishment. It comes as a chance to rewrite your story.